This is the IBJ podcast for the week of January the 21st, 2019. I'm Hayleigh Colombo, and I'm filling in for your trusty host, Mason King, this week. This week, we're focusing on soccer, specifically the future of soccer in Indianapolis. IBJ reporter Mickey Shuey broke the news earlier this month that Indianapolis soccer team Indy 11 is proposing a massive $550 million public-private development that would include a publicly financed new stadium and a privately funded stadium village that would include office space, a hotel, apartments, and a parking garage. So now, public officials at both the state and city level are about to debate whether this is financially feasible and desirable, and if so, where such a stadium would best go. But this is not the first time that Indy 11 has tried to get a stadium deal. In 2015, the team proposed an $82 million publicly financed stadium, but lawmakers nixed the idea. The team's approach this time seems to be very, very different. We invited Indy 11 owner Ersal Ozdemir to join us in studio today to dig deep in this topic and unpack the proposal and the motivation behind it. Let's begin. Thank you so much, Ersal, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So, Indy 11 has been trying to build a stadium or wanting to build a stadium for years, but so far it's been without success. What do you think is different about this proposal that you're hoping will get it across the finish line?
This proposal is significantly different than the proposal we made in 2015 in multiple ways. The main difference is that it's not just a stadium anymore. Actually, the stadium is a small component of the whole large mixed-use development called 11 Park, which will be a transformational neighborhood development, which will include hotel, office, retail, multifamily, and a 20,000-seat soccer stadium for multi-purpose events.
It seems like you've had a sort of change in strategy than when you first proposed the publicly funded stadium back in 2015. How did you come up with the decision to pitch this as a public-private partnership, including that mixed-use element that would be privately financed?
A great question. When we started the team, yesterday was the 6th-year anniversary announcement. And when we went to legislation in 2015, we had only played for 1 year. We had sold out every game. And as we talked to some legislators in the past, we were going with the approach of what all other stadiums, how they were built and how they were financed. They were all public financed, publicly owned, and most of them are operated by the government agency or private-public partnership. So we were kind of following that path, the fact that instead of coming with something completely different, people are comfortable, this has been done, if you just follow in your own different way to do that. But fast forward today, we've understood, and we had a House bill passed, we had a bill and Senate passed. So there was a support on both houses. So, and I hear that it didn't pass or didn't do that. I don't know that's really a correct statement. There was a support on both houses. Different bills passed and different ideas. The House bill was more in general in Marion County somewhere, working with the city and CIB. The Senate bill was specifically renovating Carroll Stadium. And so when you keep that in mind, we understood that, people want to support this. This is a sports town, but also people are also tired of just doing publicly financed stadium from the past experience. That is a reality. So we heard that, we learned that, and when we wanted to come back this time, we wanted to come back something differently, understanding that it can't just be a stadium that is publicly funded and there is no private investment to it. So this project, not only is a very tax friendly, that is puts the risk on the development and ownership side, but also has a large component of neighborhood development that didn't exist before. And looking around, visiting other cities, you're starting to see more and more these developments done with the stadiums. And Atlanta Braves just recently did one, Battery Park. Some existing teams like Wrigley, Cubs redeveloping around, Little Caesar in Detroit, and you go on that has been developed around that successfully. So being a developer at the same time, we were also trying to stay away being part of the development initially. I owned the development company as well as the soccer team, and we wanted to make sure back then not really do any kind of a construction development, and we didn't want anybody to think that we're trying to bring the soccer team because of development. So we said, it's about a team. I happen to be the owner. Let's focus on that. But as we go forward, our focus is going to be a large privately investment to take an area of a city that generates no taxes, and then we're going to privately invest, develop, create and recreate an area and privately, and hope that the taxes, some of the taxes that we're going to generate, we'll hope to go build publicly owned, publicly built stadium for everybody to use.
So it appears that one thing that Indy 11 might have to do is increase its attendance. Indy 11 is averaging about 10,000 people per game right now, and the stadium you're proposing will have about 20,000 seats. How do you intend to generate the fan support needed for a major project like this?
One major difference between this proposal than 2015 was only soccer stadium. So attendance, the taxes generated at the stadium was the primary source of the bonds. And so when you have 500 people, even less than you project, it will have an impact on that. The proposed new 11 Park relies on heavily the private development and the taxes generated from the new taxes, from property taxes, which we did not have before in the deal because we were not developing it, which is about 25% of the taxes that it's going to generate, and sales and income tax at the new development. So the proposed development generates about close to 80% of the taxes of that is necessary to do the stadium. So only just over 20% of the taxes will be coming out of the stadium. But what that means that if I get 18,000 or 19,000 or 17,000, it has a very little impact on the taxes generated to build the stadium. Obviously, our goal is to maximize the stadium. And when we even say a 20,000 seat capacity, we project a attendance of 18,005. As you can imagine, you're not going to maybe get sold out every game. So we actually, when we say a 20,000 stadium, we're projecting 18,000 attendance to that. So when you keep that in mind, the diversity of taxes we're proposing, it's not just a stadium, it's not just a hotel, it's not just an office building, a retail, and a multifamily. So many different revenue sources is coming to this source to build a stadium. So attendance becomes less of an issue on the taxes generated, just because the taxes generated from stadium small piece. The other part is that 10,000 plus, it doesn't seem to be a big number, but it is a big number. We're a new team. Played 5 seasons successfully. Going in 2019, we will be the second highest out of 34 teams. Another big component, that's another major reason that we need a permanent home for Indy 11, is that we don't control our schedule at Lucas Oil. This stadium is built for football, and CIB does a great job to maximize the usage for different conventions, but there are other conventions that are already scheduled, booked on the game. So last year, coming into the game so late, we could not. We had a lot of days that are not desirable for us to host games. We were gone for 45 days in July, and then we came back and we played 7 games in 17 days. So when you're playing June 30th and July 4th and July 7th, 3 games in 1 week, It's just difficult basically to get people to come. When we hopefully have a permanent stadium, we want able to schedule games what it makes sense for our customers, for our fans, for them to be able to come to the games.
One of the major hurdles you'll have to overcome is political, since you're asking the state and city, specifically the state, to direct certain tax revenue to pay off bonds on building the stadium. Do you feel like this proposal is an easier sell to the legislature than what was proposed in the past?
I strongly believe so. Again, the 11 Park project is a large private investment, is helping to generate taxes currently on sites that we're looking at it do not exist. So it's a net increment. We're not taking any current base. So all taxes that are dedicated to all government agencies from city, state will continue go through those. All we're saying is that let us invest privately, develop this project, and the additional taxes that we will generate in this project only, and not even all of it, some of it, we want that to be dedicated towards the city. So working with the city to do a private-public partnership to finance the project, and we're willing to make sure the risk is shifted from public side with that to the private side, is to also back these bonds to make sure that if there is any shortfall, even though there are multiple layers of reserves that will be part of the financing, and we are still backing it up so that the taxpayer is not on the hook for it in the long term to come.
Okay.
Additionally, another big component than before was, as other venues are done this way, we were following that path of 15. After it was built publicly, we were also asking the city to operate the venue. In this proposal, we're asking them to lease it to Indy 11 as a master tenant, and Indy 11, the team will take over 100% of the operating expenses.
Another thing that may help you this time around is that there's been a lot of changes at the legislature in terms of who's writing the budget, who's in charge. Senator Kenley, who is now retired, was a little bit of a thorn in your guys' side for the past couple of years on some of these proposals. Does the fact that there's new leadership at the legislature help you at all?
Senator Kenley has done a great service for our state, so I believe that my conversation with him at the time, even, he was supportive of this concept, because he's helped to do the local soul stadium and has done a lot with that. Obviously, he wanted to protect the taxpayers, and that's why we have a proposal that shifts the risk from taxpayers to the private side. We believe that we've always had a good relationship. One thing, again, we're doing differently this time is that this is a neighborhood development project. There's always, obviously, when you have a new changes in the legislation, we will continue, we have and we will continue to explain the project. We have and we are going to continue to reach out as many members of the General Assembly as possible to sit down, explain the project. We feel very comfortable when people do actually sit down and understand what we're trying to do. It becomes a lot easier for them to get behind it when they understand the whole holistic part of the project.
One question I have about the financing of the project is whether or not your firms Keystone Construction and Keystone Realty Group would be involved, or I guess how they could or would be involved in this.
The private part of the project that Keystone Group will develop, finance, and take the risk for will be developed by Keystone, and Keystone will be part of a team to develop and build that. The public side of the project, stadium, and infrastructure associated with that will be owned and bid by CIB or the city of Indianapolis, and they will choose the contractors. It will be public bid. Anybody is able to bid on that work. So their Keystone Construction or Keystone Realty will not be involved on building the public part of the project.
If the stadium was used for just soccer, obviously the majority of days of the year it might be unused. Do you want to try to program the stadium component of the facility such as like the other venues in town to maybe have concerts there or other events? It's
a very important part of our proposal. I think there are a lot of soccer stadiums and other venues do this already. Columbus Crew, they have a 3-day festival. Thousands of music festival do that. Obviously, our proposal also includes handful of friendly games as we do now. We brought in Mexican teams. We brought European teams. We'll continue to do that. We also propose to add a women's team, national women's team. There's high school games. Logically, we have state championships to be there, as well as football, American football, NCAA stayed in the past, lacrosse, rugby, field hockey. So there's a lot of other venues, other events that could be hosted, NCAA, high school, national events that Lucasol is too big and too expensive and maybe not available to do. That a venue like this is a smaller size. One, is less expensive to operate, to host these events, and it's more competitive for our city to bid some of these events to do. We also have a handful of concerts that were proposed at this venue. So all soccer stadiums have a handful of concerts they do. But besides that, so we're going to do that programming. We call a multi-purpose stadium with soccer mainly in mind. Not only will it maximize the venue, one of the main reasons we're doing this large mixed-use village is that we don't want to build a public asset is utilized 50 times a year, right? What do you do the rest of the time? And if it sits empty, it also has a negative impact for the neighborhood, because now you have a large piece of property with a building that you have to walk by. There's no activity. So building this project, if you look at the vision, is a part of the buildings. There's an office building surrounding the building. There's apartment building surrounding the building. There's event center part of the project. So it is really a part of the village, anchor tenant. The stadium will be utilized year round. In some sites, we will vary. Some sites, you read that in Broderpool, if there's a way, if we end up in Broderpool, we're not saying we are. That is one of the sites that we've looked at it. There's a theater part, 1,000-seat special place. We would love to salvage that and make that a performing arts center if possible. So if there's a possibility, if the site is in Broderpool, we are considering a charter school part of the project. We end up in a different site, we'll make adjustments to make sure that, one, we will go only places where the neighbor wants, and two, we will have weeks and many meetings with public input to make sure that it's something not only enhances that area, has a long-term positive impact for the neighborhood.
What are the initial, pieces of feedback that I had heard about when the Broad Ripple news came out was people were sort of saying, well, that's not necessarily a quote-unquote struggling area. Maybe this facility could better help a neighborhood that was more economically depressed, such as Lafayette Square. Where do you see that piece of feedback and how you guys make a decision?
I think we should have that discussion. Current project, as we call 11 Park, the pieces of it, hotel, apartment, retail, regardless where we end up going, it's doable, it will be successful. We need to pick a site that privately, when we invest, this is a $550 million project, so it needs to be successful, right? We need to be able to generate the taxes and stuff. So we can't go anywhere in Marion County, but we are being very open to multiple sites, and we've had several legislators reached out, and they want us to consider in their site to do that. So the concept of the financing, private-public partnership based on the private investment that we're going to make, and after it's built, the team leasing the venue, taking over, the mechanism doesn't change where it is. So right now we're looking at if the idea is good, as everybody seems to be supportive, which we're appreciative of it, then that will be the next question: where would that make sense to do that? Downtown is obviously our logical choice. We've been there with other sports. We have one of the reason downtown is done what I've done over the 20-30 years is because of our sports venues, our CA Dome, Banquet Field Live, the Indian basically. So, and they've changed the whole downtown. So it's a logical place to be somewhere close to downtown. But also, we want to be thoughtful about the neighborhoods, and some people also consider that everything goes to downtown, right? So it's like we want to consider that. So when we were requested, we did not chose that site. We were requested to consider that. We looked at it. We don't have a lot of plans. We just said it's got enough land, large, empty, big elephant, and it fits. We'll make it work there if the direction of public chooses that this is a better site for that. As we look into that after that, We did realize that it is our largest season ticket base. So there's some strong base, and we're trying to create a village feeling. It already has a lot of people live there, so there will be traffic issues we would have addressed if you're there, but there will be a lot of people also will walk to the game that you won't be able to do some parts of the city. So there's pros and cons on all the sites. Thoughtful development is important. We don't want to develop just anything anywhere.
So obviously Indy 11 has been trying to get a spot in Major League Soccer for a while now, but so far it's been unsuccessful. Does this 11 Park project still work if you don't get Indy 11 a spot in Major League Soccer?
I want to be very careful. Obviously, there's no guarantees. When we started this 6 years ago, I had a very likely chance we could have brought MLS here. That's one reason we went out and actually brought a professional team here, invested privately to do this so that people can see Indianapolis is a great soccer market. The youth population, Indiana registered from 65,000 to 95,000 in 6 years. That's a big growth. And our main base is millennials, youth, and internationals. So regardless of where we're going to play, we've always said our goal is to be best in practice, one of the best soccer clubs in the country. We are a professional league. We're not a minor league. We're not Major League Soccer at the same time. And Major League Soccer, it isn't that we have not been successful. We had an opportunity to pursue that. But it's very clear, they made it, that without a soccer-specific venue, it's not going to be possible for us to do that. So I can guarantee that we will not go to Major League Soccer without a stadium. But with the stadium, I can only say that if you look at what Nashville recently has done and Cincinnati, Nashville didn't even have a team this past year. They had a stadium, private, public financing done, mostly public financing with the city a year ago, and they were able to go to MLS. Cincinnati got a deal done with city private publication. They're able to do that. There's no guarantees when you get a stadium you do that, but from only what we see has happened, your chances goes up, because my guess will be when Major League Soccer decided to expand 4 more teams last year, I can't believe that they thought the first 2 teams would have been Cincinnati and Nashville, which are smaller markets than a lot other larger cities that are actually put a bid on like us.
Well, thank you so much, Ersal, for joining us today. I truly appreciate it, and thanks so much for explaining and digging in with us on this proposal.
My pleasure. Thank you for your time.
All right. Now we are joined with IBJ reporter Mickey Shuey. Mickey was here with us when we were interviewing Ersal. And so I think, Mickey, if possible, we could just go over a couple of the key takeaways from that interview. Was there anything that sort of jumped out to you that was surprising at all, what Ersal said?
Well, thanks for having me, Hayleigh. It's really in the early stages, so they're trying to make sure that their message is getting across the way that they want it to. So he didn't stray too far from that today, and that's not really a surprise. But I think the fact that he's willing to talk about the project so openly right now is a sign that things are moving forward for the project. And with the fact that legislation was just filed this week to allow the city to work with the team and the CIB on this project, I think that's a good sign that the project is definitely advancing.
So it also sounded like he elaborated much more on the Broad Ripple proposal.
I actually was really surprised that he talked about that one at all, because the development team has been really cagey about talking about any of their possible sites, in particular the Broad Ripple site, after IPS released a letter last week talking about the fact that the team expressed interest. So the fact that he's continuing to have conversations with those in that community and elsewhere, it sounds like, really shows that while it's on the table right now, it may not be the only one, but it's definitely up there.
One thing that I found sort of interesting about it was that he clearly is pitched this to lawmakers in terms of what other sort of extraneous economic development benefit it would have. So it seems like the sort of stadium village component to it is so important to making this project work both politically and financially. It's all about the village. It's all about the tax dollars that will be generated.
Absolutely. I think it is definitely a need for the team to have this private component as part of their project pitch, because all the city and state lawmakers that I've spoken with are in the camp that believes that without that private partnership with public dollars, there is no such project that could move forward.
So what's the next step here?
So the next step is probably going to be the announcement of the investors or the location of the stadium site. Without investors, there's not going to be enough money to actually pay for this project by all accounts. And without a stadium site, you can't really move forward with the city side of things as far as finalizing the PSDA if that legislation passes, and then setting up the TIF district that would go along with it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mickey, for joining us today to help us make sense of this. I know it's a very complicated topic, and you're going to be on top of it, so we will definitely look forward to reading more of your coverage about this in future issues. And Mickey also has a very detailed story about this proposal in this week's issue of IBJ, which everyone should check out. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much to Indy 11 owner Ersal Ozdemir and reporter Mickey Shuey for joining us today. Before you get going, I'd love to draw your attention to a few stories in this week's edition of IBJ. Reporter Susan Orr has a story about online plus-size retailer Full Beauty Brands' financial struggles, which include plans to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Reporter Sam Quinn has a story for all of our suburbanite commuter friends who are dealing with traffic in Westfield. And Anthony Shutley has a profile on tech entrepreneur Scott Jones' son, Daniel Jones, who is taking on ride-sharing Goliaths, Uber, and Lyft with a new company. You can read all of these stories in IBJ's print edition or at ibj.com. Mason will be back with you next week. Thanks, everybody.